On this Saturday night, state of emergency. A massive earthquake rocks Haiti, causing death and destruction in the Caribbean country, already reeling from a humanitarian crisis. Closing in on Kabul, the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan is now within striking distance of the country's capital. On your marks, political leaders get set to hit the campaign trail with an election call expected Sunday. Plus, what's the secret to athletic success?
The one thing that has kept me sane throughout this whole process is my love for knitting and crochet.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight in Haiti. Thousands of people are feared dead after that country was hit by a powerful earthquake. The 7.2 magnitude quake struck this morning about 125 kilometers west of the capital, Port-au-Prince. Today's earthquake was even larger and more shallow than the devastating quake that rocked the Caribbean country 11 years ago, killing around 250,000 people. The first images are just beginning to emerge from the aftermath. Hundreds are already confirmed dead, but that number is expected to rise in the coming hours. The U.S. Geological Survey has issued a red alert warning of a high number of expected casualties as aid groups now scramble to assess the damage. We're now joined by a member of one of those aid organizations. Cara Buck is the acting country director with Mercy Corps in Haiti, and she joins us now from the capital, Port-au-Prince. Cara, thank you for joining us. So what is the latest that you're hearing about the extent of the damage on the ground?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me. Neep, which is, the epicenter, is quite rural with high rates of poverty and hunger. From this morning, phone, internet access, communications have been very limited. But we are hearing from our team on the ground. We have a team of 19 on the ground in Neep, which is the epicenter. That there's reported collapses, collapsing homes, buildings, and potential road blockages accessing Neep. And everyone is worried about the family and worried about those that may have been injured.
And what can you tell us about the areas that were worst hit, before the quake? How populated were they? Any hospitals nearby?
Sure. So certainly, kind of as I mentioned, it's a rather rural area, Neep and surrounding areas with poverty, hunger, food insecurity, et cetera.
And we know, of course, the country's still recovering from the devastating earthquake back in 2010, plus the pandemic, food insecurity, the recent assassination of the Haitian president. So to what extent, Cara, is the country able to respond to this latest disaster?
I think any country under similar conditions would, it would be difficult for them to respond, and we're seeing nothing different in Haiti. So, absolutely resources are stretched, but we're trying to pull together and do what we can to ensure people have what they need.
And any message for the international community at this point?
Certainly. I mean, it's somewhat of a shame or unfortunate that it takes something like an earthquake to ensure the spotlight is on Haiti. But the people here, the team, are resilient, and like I said, we're going to do everything we can to make sure people have what they need and see them through this incident.
That's Cara Buck with Mercy Corps in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Stay safe. Thanks, Cara.
Thank you so much.
Canada is home to nearly 200,000 Haitian-Canadians, and many tonight are left feeling helpless, unable to reach their relatives amid news of the devastation. Dan Spector has their story.
On a sunny Saturday morning, Haiti was jolted awake and into scenes of pure horror. A 7.2 magnitude earthquake hit the south of the country at about 8:30 a.m., turning many buildings to rubble and sending people running into the streets out of fear their homes could collapse. Haiti was still recovering from the powerful earthquake that struck the Caribbean nation in 2010. This one was even stronger.
It's unbelievable for us again.
Marjorie Villefranche runs Montreal's Maison d'Haïti, a community center serving the tens of thousands of Haitian expats who live in the city.
We know that the hospitals are full and there is no help.
She says the area of Haiti hardest hit by Saturday's quake is remote.
It's a very isolated region with no roads to go there. So how the help will get there? By plane, by boat, we don't know.
It was a nightmare living once again.
France Benjamin is a member of Quebec's National Assembly and was born in Haiti. He's been hearing from Montrealers who have not been able to reach their loved ones living near the earthquake's epicenter.
It is a stressful situation for them, of course.
Tout le monde essaye d'en savoir un peu plus.
Everyone is trying to find out more, says Jean Numa Goudou, who runs a Haitian newspaper in Montreal. He's spoken to dozens of Montrealers trying to find out if friends and family members are okay.
We're going to need the solidarity and the help of the whole Canadian society.
Benjamin says a meeting is being planned with Montreal Haitian leaders to discuss what can be done to help. Premier Legault on Twitter sent his thoughts to his province's Haitian population. Mayor Valérie Plante says her heart is with Haiti and Montreal's Haitian community, the largest in Canada, and that the city will help finance relief efforts.
We feel useless here. What can we do?
For now, Montreal Haitians can only hope and pray, as many expect the news will get worse in the coming days. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Turning now to the developing situation in Afghanistan. The Taliban is rapidly advancing across large parts of the country. Now, the insurgents have captured much of the northwest and southern Afghanistan, and they now control about 2/3 of the country. In just the last 24 hours, the Taliban has reportedly taken 4 more provincial capitals, including Mazar-e-Sharif, leaving Kabul as the last major city under the Western Allied government's control, at least for now. The militants are now just 70 kilometers outside of the capital. Like Canada, the United States is working to get its personnel out of Kabul, and President Biden just announced he's sending 1,000 additional troops to help with that mission. As Jennifer Johnson explains, human rights groups fear the country is on the brink of a major humanitarian crisis.
As the world watches in shock, Taliban soldiers are taking control of Afghanistan with lightning speed. The militants are adding to their ranks, freeing Taliban prisoners in several cities. Aid workers are warning of a humanitarian crisis as Afghans flee to Kabul. Others are packing the airport, desperate to get out. Millions of women fear what will happen to them under oppressive Taliban rule.
I'm afraid of being killed. I'm totally sure that I will not survive here.
The militants are notorious for violence against women, raping and torturing those who won't live by their strict religious rules. Many believe they will be in prison in their homes again, stripped of all rights, education, or worse.
Women are scared. They're not even going outside because you might go outside and risk your life because you're not wearing the appropriate clothing in the eyes of the Taliban.
Thousands of desperate Afghans are also crowding the border of Pakistan, begging to be let in. Abandoned by the U.S. military and its allies, some Afghan soldiers are being executed. Others are laying down their arms. Left behind, U.S. military equipment seized by the Taliban.
We are always worried about U.S. equipment that could fall into an adversary's hands.
5,000 members of the U.S. military are rushing to Kabul temporarily to evacuate embassy staff. President Joe Biden left Washington for Camp David this weekend, staying publicly silent about the crisis while being briefed by national security and military leaders. But others are speaking out, including soldiers who fought to protect Afghanistan from extremists.
I'm really upset. Why did we spend the past decade there? What was the purpose? What was the goal?
For now, President Biden is sticking to his decision to withdraw U.S. troops by the end of the month, believing the war had gone on too long and cost too many American lives. But he is under increasing pressure to do something before it's too late. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Back here at home, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will set the stage for the country's 44th general election tomorrow when he asks the Governor-General to dissolve Parliament. Election day is expected to be September the 20th. Heading to the polls in a pandemic will be a different experience for voters. Our chief political correspondent David Aiken joins us now with more on what to expect. David.
Well, the objective for the incumbent Liberals is pretty obvious, Jeff. It's majority or bust. A minority government will not be good enough for Justin Trudeau's Liberals. And in fact, if that's what happens at the end of this campaign, you can expect some Liberals may start to talk about a leadership change. Now, the polls for the last year have been consistent. Liberals have always been leading, but their lead as they start this campaign is not quite big enough to guarantee that majority, so this campaign will matter. For Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole, anything less than forming a minority government will be seen as a failure. And remember, in 2019, Andrew Scheer's Conservatives won the popular vote and improved their party standing by about 20 seats, and yet Scheer lost his job. O'Toole has probably the most difficult task ahead of any leader. The NDP and Jagmeet Singh look set to move from 4th place in the House of Commons to 3rd place. A bigger caucus in a minority government where they hold the balance of power, that is the NDP sweet spot. And for that reason, Singh's campaign just might be the one to watch. As for the Bloc Québécois and its leader, Yves-François Blanchet, the BQ have 32 seats now, and the poll suggests they could finish the campaign with about the same. And if they do that, the Bloc just might block that Liberal majority. As for the Greens and leader Annamie Paul, well, the party is in complete disarray, and it might count itself lucky if it holds on to just Elizabeth May's seat on Vancouver Island. Now, this pandemic election will also be a very different one for voters. Fewer mass rallies. Less likelihood a candidate will knock on your door, as campaigns will rely much more heavily on personalized digital media for voter outreach. And how we vote will likely be very different this time. Elections Canada believes that as many as 5 million Canadians will vote by mail this time. That compares to just 50,000 who voted by mail in 2019. And since each one of those mail-in ballots has to be opened by hand and has to be counted by hand, unlike the U.S., there's no machines involved, while Elections Canada is warning it might be a few days after Election Day before we get the final result and know what our next parliament looks like. Jeff?
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thanks, David. We're getting a clearer picture tonight of the devastation from those raging wildfires tearing through BC's interior. This is the community of Monty Lake, where residents are returning to find their homes reduced to ash, wiped out after being overrun by the massive White Rock Lake wildfire burning near Vernon. BC officials are warning tourists to avoid traveling to the popular Okanagan region this weekend, with more evacuation orders likely.
If you are thinking of visiting there, don't. We want to ensure that people in these communities will be able to evacuate if necessary, access the supports they need, as well as the safety of our firefighters on the ground.
Thousands of people have already been ordered to leave their homes, and the situation is expected to spiral, with powerful winds clocking 60 kilometers an hour forecast to arrive tomorrow, adding more fuel to the fires. Tonight, 271 wildfires are burning across BC. 60 of those began just this week at the height of another searing heat wave. Those wildfires have been fueled in part by scorching temperatures, and new data shows why July was the hottest month ever recorded. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the U.S., the combined land and ocean surface temperature was almost a degree above the 20th century average at 15.8 degrees. That makes it the highest temperature ever recorded in the world since records began 142 years ago. Still ahead, Canada's vaccine passport plans. Who will need them and how will they work? In Montreal, thousands gathered to protest the province's planned COVID-19 passport. Quebec confirmed this week that a certificate system will be implemented in September. The move would give only fully vaccinated people access to restaurants, bars, festivals, and other events. Organizers of today's protest call it an unprecedented prejudice for the population. And the federal government also announced plans for a vaccine passport system for travelers, but there is still plenty of confusion about how it will work. Jamie Morocker has more.
Zach Gerling says moving back to Canada from the British Virgin Islands was chaos amid COVID.
Having the tests and like hotel quarantines and the quarantine timing and all the different ways that people are going around.
It's why the 28-year-old jet setter is excited about Canada announcing a federal COVID-19 vaccine passport.
If it makes it easier to get around and move people safely and easier, I'm all for it.
But it may not be easier for Gerling. He was vaccinated with AstraZeneca, which despite being an approved COVID-19 vaccine here, may not be recognized in other countries. David Dole, who was vaccinated with a mix of Moderna and Pfizer, faces a similar problem.
There is no issue with mixing vaccines as far as the science goes so far. And I think Canada needs to clear that up.
But Ottawa hasn't offered any assurances the passport will fix this problem or even that foreign countries will accept it.
I think this is a global effort. If it's going to be something that's supposed to be recognized by all countries.
Still, travel experts are hopeful.
The travelers all will have some peace of mind that they'll know prior to going to a country that this passport will be accepted.
Martin Firestone runs a travel insurance brokerage in Toronto and says there are also questions about domestic use of the federal document.
The ability to go to a sports attraction, a cinema, or a restaurant, and will it be used for that? That's the gray line.
Already, some provinces, including Quebec, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, are shutting down the idea of using the federal passport locally. Ontario, meantime, is asking Ottawa to pick up the pace, with no hard rollout date revealed other than early fall.
Hopefully this wouldn't be a permanent thing. It's just hopefully for the amount of time while the global pandemic is going on.
There's no word on how long these vaccine passports would be in effect for, but we do know that they'll likely be digital and common across all provinces. They will include the holder's COVID-19 vaccine history and will be available to all Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and temporary residents who are living here and fully vaccinated. Jamie Morocker, Global News, Toronto.
Still ahead, why the race appears to be tightening ahead of Tuesday's election in Nova Scotia. Welcome back. As Canadians get ready for a federal election in Nova Scotia, the focus is still on the provincial vote, which takes place this Tuesday. So far in Canada, every incumbent government that has called an election during the pandemic has won. But will Nova Scotia buck the trend? Alicia Draus reports.
Vote making sure that we rebound with a stronger economy.
For the most part, it's been a calm campaign, but that's not to say it's been completely without controversy. Just before the election was called, Premier Ian Rankin publicly announced that in the early 2000s, he had been charged twice with drinking and driving. And despite failing 2 breathalyzers, he claimed he was innocent in the second case, where the charges were dropped due to a lack of evidence. The official campaign then got off to a rocky start when a Liberal Party candidate dropped out the first week. Robin Ingraham initially blamed mental health reasons, but in a follow-up post on social media, the former candidate for Dartmouth South said that was what the party had told her to say. Instead, she says she was actually asked to leave the party over boudoir photos posted online.
So the public was asked to be forgiving of Ian Rankin for his past encounters with the law, including a conviction. And here you have a situation where a woman candidate had not had any trouble with the law.
While the Liberals are polling in the lead, both the Progressive Conservatives and NDP have been gaining ground, with each party having a clear focus.
Getting Nova Scotians access to health care. That's what this campaign is all about.
A vote for the NDP is a vote for permanent rent control, and a vote for permanent rent control is a vote for the NDP.
I think people are kind of gravitating to those messages. I don't see as much of a clear message from the Liberal campaign.
While the Liberals do have the advantage of being an incumbent government that successfully led Nova Scotia through the COVID-19 pandemic, Liberal leader Ian Rankin can't take full credit for that.
That was a lot of McNeil. That was only been Rankin for a short time.
In February, Rankin replaced Liberal leader Stephen McNeil, who stepped down after leading the party since 2007. But in the end, it all comes down to ballots cast, and voter turnout has been on the decline, with just over 53% of people voting in 2017.
The most important thing now is for the parties to mobilize their vote and make sure that people actually show up for them.
Even after all the ballots are cast, it won't be long before Nova Scotians are returning to the polls for a federal election in September. And while Nova Scotia is currently just one of 2 provinces with a Liberal provincial government, even if that changes on Tuesday, it likely won't have any impact on the federal Liberals who currently hold the majority of seats in Nova Scotia. Alicia Draus, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight, your Canada is Pitt River in Pitt Meadows, BC. Thanks for watching. Donna Friesen will be back at the anchor desk with you tomorrow. Have a great night.